Hi, Niklas. Welcome back.
Hey, Adam. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah. So let's talk about the so-called cloud native starter from GitHub. And this is the official. This is an IBM organization project. And
Yes.
Cloud Native Starter is the sub-project. So IBM is the organization. Cloud Native Starter is a project from GitHub.
Yep.
So the first feedback, what's lacking is a nice page. So you have just the GitHub project. What you need is cloudnative.io or something like this, like welcome page.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And this is very easy to achieve. I did it for my project, so you can clone it. So you need just a how it's called the static page.
Yeah.
And this is called.
Yeah, you're right. We should do that. Absolutely.
Yep. But they are using the static page generator from it's a very famous one, and you just have to set up the templates, and then it just works out of the box. So there's almost nothing to do.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
From other samples. We do have a landing page on IBM Developer that highlights basically. It's a series. We call it a series, and it points to this project and then to the blog entries. But yeah, the URL is not that easy to remember, I guess.
Yeah, and the other projects, so the welcome pages, however you call them, they look really nice. So the project is Apache, which is a good thing because you can basically clone it and use it. And now the first question, on which environments you tested the whole thing, so the application?
Yeah, so as you know, one of the big advantages of Kubernetes is the ability that you can basically run these cloud native apps everywhere. Every big cloud provider offers Kubernetes on public, on premises. And we tested 4 different environments. We started with Minikube because as a developer, I love being able to do as much as possible locally. Then we added the IBM Kubernetes service, but the same scripts should work pretty much the same for other clouds if you change the links to the different registries, to the images. The third was then we went on with Minishift, which is only quotation marks 3.11, OpenShift 3.11 locally. So we're going to change that and also update to 4.2 at some point. And the fourth environment is then OpenShift, again in the IBM cloud, but the scripts can also be used for other OpenShift deployments. So
yeah, so you didn't test it with code ready, so the 4 version yet, right?
Well, we have it running locally, but we haven't really updated the scripts. There's 1 or 2 minor tweaks that we have to do not in the code, but in the scripts. And we have run it. We have it running locally, but it's not part of the project yet.
Yeah, and the project is basically 2 microservices written in MicroProfile or MicroProfile, Node.js, and Spring Boot. So you have different choices. But I took a look at the MicroProfile variant of Flavor, and there's articles and authors. So are 2 microservices, and they are deployed to Kubernetes, also first Docker and then Kubernetes. And because it's Kubernetes, I mean, to the listeners, so Kubernetes is the backbone of, I would say, all clouds. So if something works on Kubernetes, it usually works on all clouds. So, and OpenShift is more, I would say, convenient flavor of Kubernetes, and all the other clouds are also using Kubernetes. So if it works on IBM Cloud, it should also work on GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, and the Azure Kubernetes service.
Yeah, exactly. One of my goals was to, again, make it as simple as possible to use, but then also to allow as many people as possible to use it by providing a good license, 1, and 2, by making clear what is available as open source, what runs everywhere versus what is proprietary. So when you go to the GitHub repo, there is an architecture diagram. It shows all the different services, and the complete core of this application is available as open source, right? So there's no need for developers to use any other proprietary service or commercial service. But then there are some samples, for example, an SQL database, right? Obviously you can use whatever you like because we use JPA, but we use an SQL database in our IBM cloud, right? Similarly, for a NoSQL database, you could, switch to another database easily. Or for authentication, we use another IBM service called AppID to authenticate against your organization directory. But since this uses OpenID Connect, you can switch to any other provider, whether that's Google or what have you.
Yeah, but this is
so
the beauty of MicroProfile is it already we are mostly working against the API, and I took a look at the project, and this is just about the scripts. So the scripts set up the whole environment, and whether I am talking to DB2 or Oracle or Postgres or whatever cloud, usually I don't care because I am using JPA, right?
Yep. Exactly. So these services are currently, or the database services in particular, are currently basically hosted separately. So in other words, not in your Kubernetes cluster. But we are also looking into adding a Postgres into the cluster if you want to move the application together with your data. Exactly. Okay, so there's pros and cons, right? I mean, it's certainly more work for you as an operator or administrator, but there's advantages. Sometimes you need to do that because you're not allowed to put anything in a public cloud, certain data. So we're looking into the operators, and there's one for Postgres that I would like to add to this example as well. But then again, I also don't want to make the sample too complicated, right? So there's always a trade-off between how much features do we want to show, and how complex, will it be?
But listeners, if they are interested, they just could contribute to whatever deployment, to whatever cloud they like, right? So if someone
absolutely
has interest,
awesome.
they can give you a pull request, and just why not? What I also like about your example is the setup scripts. Because the problem is not, the MicroProfile is just trivial. Jakarta. What I like about Jakarta in MicroProfile, you can focus on business, and everything else is just hidden, so you don't care about that. So, but setup, Kubernetes is a completely different beast. So the first question I have,
exactly,
the first question I have is the first best practice. So, how many namespaces or OpenShift projects do you have to set up?
Well, for this one, since it's a rather simple application with only these 3 microservices, more or less, we only put everything in one namespace.
Very good.
To keep it simple.
So this is also what I do in my project. So the first question is to know, what is the relation between Kubernetes namespace or OpenShift project and an app? Because an application comprises multiple microservices. And for me, this is one-to-one relation. So what I would do is I would just, put what you did, this is one application. It's called, what is actually the name of the application? It's not, but because it's articles and authors, so the whole thing would be blog or magazine, or what is it actually?
Yeah, right now we call the whole application cloud native starter.
Yeah, but
obviously that doesn't really make sense from a user experience standpoint.
For user experience, it would be more like a blog or something like this.
Okay. List of articles.
So let's say that we have a blog which comprises 3 microservices: authentication, authors, and articles, right? There are web app, authors, and articles.
So there's another one, web API, which implements a backend for Frontend. So that's the only one the web application talks to. And the web API then invokes articles and authors. And I added this other service, this web API service, so that I can also demonstrate how to invoke from Java other REST APIs using the MicroProfile REST client. And I also wanted to have a service with 2 different versions to demonstrate traffic management with Istio.
Okay.
So that's why we added that one.
So we have backend from frontend. What it basically means, there is a service which exposes a convenient API to the web client. And the benefit is articles and authors could expose, I would say, business interfaces, how it should be from the REST perspective, which is not always convenient for the front end. So the web API is the first facet, and it communicates with the microservice in the background. Exactly. So and everything lives in one namespace. So it means in practice, I would get 3 such environments. So I would block dev, block int, and block prod. So and probably, the dev and int would live in one cluster, and the production would be completely isolated. This would be the real world scenario.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. And if we just, go through the user click to the backend. So you use the vue.js front-end framework. The question is why?
Yeah. Well, because I'm a big fan of it.
Oh, really?
I used to do a lot with Angular like 2 or 3 years ago, which is not bad either. But I wanted to learn something new. So whenever I do these, new samples or so, I try not only to pick the things that I'm most convenient with, but try to pick new things so that I can learn at the same time. And vue.js I really like, because it's so easy to use. The documentation is really good. To me, it feels like it combines the best from Angular and React. So that's why I picked it. I mean, it doesn't really do much, right?
No.
So, but it's,
so kudos to you. So you didn't wanted to use Angular. So if you would use Angular, I would say we will have to wait half an hour until everything installs on OpenShift. So but
they have added some optimizations, right? To be fair, there's some new Webpack build tools so that you can bundle your source code together and don't have this huge amount of files and stuff. So there's a lot of improvements going on there as well.
Okay, but what's the future? And what I'm doing is I just use web components. No.
I saw one of
and I would have to say this right now because I get asked about my opinion about Vue.js. Vue.js is very reasonable, but if you go to GitHub and try to look at the contributors, you will find that it's actually everything is implemented by one guy. And
I know.
And this is a risk for larger companies, a huge risk. And if I show this page, no one would like to use Vue.js in larger projects. So this is the only issue I have. And all other frameworks, this is well distributed. If you look at React or Angular, at least there are more developers working on it. But this guy comes from China, New Jersey in China, which is interesting. This is the only problem.
I understand your point, but I mean, at least so far it has worked pretty well.
Vue is very good, and this is actually for this application, it doesn't matter. I just wanted, what was your choice? And Vue is really nice, so go for it. Yeah. And again, if someone has time, or I find some time, we could contribute a web component from that to the same. So it's actually no problem at all.
So the reason why I used Vue and what I also like about Angular and React, right, is this Redux mechanism, the way to basically have the one, I mean, in very simple terms, store. Right? You have the one kind of global variable with all your data, and that's pretty cool for one-page apps or single-page apps, right? Because you want to notify another component on another page, you put it in the store, you get an event and you can do something with it, right? And that is very powerful. That is something where I had really bad experiences with Angular like a couple of years ago before, they added Redux, because there were always problems with component updates, right? And that's something that I didn't want to implement myself.
But you can use Redux right away. So there's just one JavaScript file, so you can just
multiple versions. Yeah, but I think that was the main reason why.
Okay. Because I'm using Redux with web components right now, and this is very easy. npm Redux, so you have it and you can just use it. So it's not a big deal.
Okay, cool.
So we have Vue application, and this goes through Ingress. So Ingress is like OpenShift route would be, I would say, this is the same as in OpenShift. In the Ingress controller is the Kubernetes term, right?
No, yes. So it's kind of irritating because, as I said, there's so many different components and terms here. This Ingress controller is actually the istio Ingress controller, not the Kubernetes Ingress controller, because we are using istio here, as I said briefly, for things like traffic management. We need to use the istio Ingress controller.
Okay. So the Vue talks via istio, and istio would also provide SSL termination and whatever would be necessary in production.
Well, actually, not in this example, but yes, that's exactly yes.
Okay. Yep. And so then the Ingress controller is set up to talk to the APIs to do the authentication. What's the role of the istio Ingress controller in your application?
Yeah, it's basically the entry point, right, into the whole application, and we use it primarily to do the traffic routing thing between the two different versions of Web API. And also you need to open up the ports so that you can access, for example, here the authentication service, and so that you can get the Vue application from the backend. So yeah, that's basically, I mean, a very simple way just to open up certain ports so that you don't expose everything.
How you route between different versions? So what does istio look in the headers, or what's the idea there?
Yeah, so that's really very simple with istio. Like, you have a YAML file, like for everything in istio and Kubernetes. And essentially you define on top of these services that you define in Kubernetes YAML files, you define these virtual services. Okay, basically an abstraction. And then you can define this traffic routing, and you can say, route to this virtual service or this or this specific version of a virtual service. And, you can do many different things. Like in this example, we kept it very simple. We do an 80-20% traffic splitting, just, randomly. No further logic there. But you can also access the headers, as you said, right? You can, basically do everything you want. You can do A/B testing, to say only for mobile devices, this version, only for desktop, this, canary rollouts, all of these things.
Yeah, and you will find the YAML is an istio package, and the name is istio ingress service web 8020 YAML. I'm just looking at this right now, and the configuration is pretty simple. You have route, destination, and there you have weight 80 or weight 20 to different subsets. Subset V1 and subset V2. So this would be okay.
Yep.
So in this particular case, if I would run it on OpenShift, there would be no explicit route. So the ingress would expose the DNS name, right?
Actually, that's a good question. No, we do have to use the OpenShift routes.
So what you did, you replaced the HR proxy from OpenShift with ingress, with istio, how to call it? What was it? Service.
To be fair, I think I'm pretty sure that we don't have the istio yet on OpenShift.
Okay.
So the traffic management we only do on Kubernetes and Minikube. And the reason was because we were hoping to get the istio version that comes with 4.2 out of the box, so that we wouldn't have to tell people how to install it manually.
That's a very good idea. But how it would work technically on OpenShift 3.11, you will have to replace the HA proxy. What is it? Not the load balancer. It's actually the controller. I think this is the OpenShift term, but it's actually the load balancer. You can do it right away with Nginx on whatever, and you would have to replace it with istio. Okay, but fair point. So this is a Kubernetes. So there's an istio, and the istio routes then to the backend for frontend. Exactly.
Yep.
Web API v1 or Web API v2.
Yes, exactly.
How it is written? Is it still Service Gateway, or is it a Java project? What is it? This Web API.
The web API is also using MicroProfile, Java MicroProfile, and it's just a simple JXRS, with a open API documentation. So it's kind of the boring stuff, really. And then the more exciting thing is how to invoke now the articles and author service, and that's where we use MicroProfile REST client, right? And I really like that because as a, former JavaScript developer, I want that easy experience, right? I want to be able to invoke something as easily as possible. I don't want to worry about serialization, deserialization, and you can do these things very easily with the MicroProfile REST client. So yeah, it's really easy now to do for Java developers as well.
And what is the com IBM Web API business.service, which is injected? Is this part of what?
It's a couple of months ago, but I think I tried to do something like a clean architecture approach where I have 3 layers of logic. One is just the REST part. Okay, then 2 is the actual service, the business logic, and 3 is the persistence.
Okay.
Right. So I think I used the injection just to pass, one layer to the other.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I saw, and I didn't got it immediately. So what I do. The boundary control entity, which is an ancient pattern, but works well. The boundary is our resources and facades. Control would be your service, and the data are the entities. This is how I structure larger applications, and it works well. And I'm an external consultant, and the cool story is I can always refer to the names, where you can even draw the icons, boundary control entity. So I don't have to discuss, a lot about the naming.
Yeah.
So this is my hack to find the Parkinson law of triviality. Okay, nice. So so we have backend for frontend. This is called Web API. Name of the project is Web API Java JE. And I just took a look at the code, and this is what does the translation. And means it in ideal world, this thing would expose a convenient API to the vue.js or to the web components, and it will communicate with articles and authors. So conceptually, it's a facade, right?
Yep, correct.
Yeah. So and then we have 2 business microservices: is articles and authors. So we have MicroProfile. Very simple, lean.
Yeah, exactly. They are not really doing much, right? They're really, really simple. So you have two versions of those. You can use these services with an in-memory data store, right? Which is the easiest way to get started because you don't have any dependencies to databases. And then for the articles one, the Java implementation, you can connect to an SQL database using JPA. And for authors, which has been implemented with Node.js, you can connect to one of the NoSQL databases that we have in the cloud, which is called Cloudant, a commercial version of Apache CouchDB.
Ah, okay. So this is the full circle to the Lotus Notes server.
Yeah, what we talked about earlier, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so and which API are you using to talk to the Cloudant? Is this like you are using Node.js Couch API?
No, they have lots of different APIs for different programming languages. We use here I'm pretty sure it's the Cloudant Cloudant API. It's kind of similar to the CouchDB API, but I think there are some minor differences. And I think it was along how efficiently you can query certain things where one is better than the other. But to be honest, I don't remember the details.
Okay. But the articles talks via JPA to the DB2 running in the cloud as well.
Yep, exactly.
So IBM has an offer in running DB2 as a service?
Yes, and there's also PostgreSQL if you want. It's another commercial offering.
Hey, cool. And so you can just use JDBC driver, so there's nothing special with it. So you can just order an instance and cool, runs in the cloud. Nice.
Yep.
The only strange thing you have OpenID, App ID. I assume it does, the authentication and authorization. But we have one microservice called authentication, and this is a Node service. So what is the purpose of the Node authentication service?
Yeah, so this part, I would hope that I can change that to something similar. So to give you some background, when I started, I was assuming that when you use Kubernetes, that there is an easy way to do authentication. Like, you especially for enterprise applications, right? The first thing you need, in most cases anyway, is the ability to log in for a user, right? And then for enterprise applications, you want to be able to access your existing enterprise organization directory. Okay. So I was expecting, or I was hoping that Kubernetes would provide a service that would allow me to do this OAuth dance, to get the JWT token and everything. And it turns out it's not there, right? So I was hoping to find that in Istio. It's not there either. Yet there's hope that something will be added to Istio. And there's actually another IBM open source project who does it, which didn't exist at the time when I implemented this. So what I ended up doing was just to write my own little authentication service. And it's really just, I don't know, a couple of handful of lines of code. It's pretty trivial because I use an existing NPM module to do this whole dance thing,
and
I can connect to any
OpenID flow, you mean? So,
Yes.
Okay.
Well, OpenID Connect, right, is an extension of OAuth. OAuth authorization, OpenID Connect identification. So exactly. That's what I use it for.
And the OpenID on App ID is the IBM offering, which is not able to provide you tokens. It just understands the OpenID Connect flow, right?
Yes. And so IBM App ID is our offering, right, to connect to enterprise directories or to social providers. It's basically some sort of, federation if you want. It's very easy to use, and it provides or it supports OpenID Connect. And that's why you can also use any other OpenID Connect provider. So in this authentication service, I didn't put any code in there that is specific for the IBM App ID service. That's why I said, you can use Google or your own, service to do the same thing. And again, I really hope that this whole, authentication capability will be added to Istio at some point, because it doesn't make sense that developers, that you have to implement these things, over and over again for every application. That really should be part of the platform. There's no reason why it's not at this point, I think.
In some project we are using Keycloak and it works really well.
So yeah. You mentioned that. I looked into it briefly. That looks in fact promising, but as always, right, it would be great to minimize dependencies. So if this would come out of the box with Kubernetes, it would even be better.
What Keycloak? You're right. But what Keycloak, why Keycloak is used is in my projects, especially startups like it, is because you can manage the users. So you have, nice user management where you can specify how long is the password or whatever. And this is the job of the Keycloak. And then it just emits JSON Web Tokens. And also cool story, Keycloak comes with in gateway written in Go, I think, where they they do the flow automatically. So there's like the Go library which communicates with the Keycloak backend. So it could be interesting.
Okay. And can you use it also to access your existing enterprise directory?
Yes. So what you can do with Keycloak, it comes default is like it uses internal Hibernate to access, I think, H2 or something. But you can set up, that Keycloak uses LDAP or whatever you like. So it's just it is actually used in lots of enterprise projects.
Okay. Yeah, no, because that was my key requirement, right? I wanted to be able to use XAML, etc., right? To reuse my existing login dialog, right? No need to implement yet another login page.
Yeah.
So it sounds like kind of similar to AppID then in that case.
Yeah, and you mentioned there is an open source project from IBM which does the authentication. What's the name of the project?
Yeah, it's still on my list to look into it a little bit closer, but it's part of it. It has been open sourced by our IBM AppID team because
cool.
It looks like they found that same requirement, and it's right now a standalone open source project. I don't know the exact name, but if you search for IBM AppID and then authentication, I guess, or something, you should be able to find it. I mean, we can put it in the show notes if you want.
So this was the walkthrough through the businesses, but we are not done because what you also have. It is monitoring, right? And what I found is Prometheus references.
Yeah, and observability in general, right?
Yes.
And containers and stuff, yep. So, well, first of all, containers obviously is the first thing you need, right? So
wait a second. Yeah. What's the difference between monitoring and observability?
Well, yeah, good question. I mean, I would consider observability to be a superset of monitoring with tracing and everything, but I don't know. It's probably pretty much the same thing. Yeah,
okay.
You're right.
So and Prometheus is also there. So is Prometheus installed by a script or is use?
Yeah, that comes with Istio, right? It's one of the tools that comes with Istio. So when you install Istio and we have the scripts to do that, then you get Prometheus out of the box. The only thing you need to do there is to change the configuration. And I think I saw that in one of your podcasts or videos. That this is always the one thing you have to do manually, right? So to change the configuration to point to your endpoints.
Yes. What I did, I usually using Prometheus on OpenShift, but it should work at Kubernetes the same. And what Prometheus does is it searches for labels inside the services, and then you don't have to do this. So it will learn from the services what the IP addresses are. And then it accesses the IP addresses. This is the standard Kubernetes way, but I only tested this on OpenShift, so it works on my project already. So it configures itself by labels.
Okay, yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, this is how Prometheus works, and also something like Jaeger tracing also configures itself. So it's like common theme in Kubernetes, just searching for labels, and this is the discovery process. I was always curious to know what the discovery actually means and what are you doing. They are searching for key value pairs actually behind the scenes.
Okay, yeah, cool. And as I said, Jaeger is part of Istio as well, and that's what we use for tracing.
Yeah,
right. It comes out of the box.
Yeah. What it means on OpenShift, you don't have Prometheus and we don't have Jaeger, right? So what you are talking about, you're providing in Kubernetes the full experience, and then Minishift or OpenShift, you don't have Prometheus.
Exactly. Yeah, as I said, we're still waiting basically for two. I mean, we're not waiting because it's there, but it's on our list to.
That's actually no different. So I installed, Prometheus and Jaeger on OpenShift, and it worked like on plain Kubernetes, no difference at all. Exactly. Ingress. I mean, Istio is a little bit different because it comes with lots of stuff already. So, do you have business metrics or only, technical metrics?
Yeah, we have also application specific metrics in one of the services. I think in Web API, just to show that. In some cases, you have to put something in your code, right? I mean, there is some overlap, as we talked about earlier, between MicroProfile and Istio functionality. And, I think it's good to do as much as possible in platforms via Kubernetes and Istio functionality because it's generic and you don't have to implement it yourself. It works for different programming languages. But then there are these application-specific features like, application-specific authorization or in this case metrics, right? So here I added used the some of the MicroProfile new annotations to see these metrics there as well. So not only the generic ones, but also application-specific.
I would say you always have to do application-specific metrics because you cannot do this with Istio. I'll give you an example. For instance, in the recent project, we use messaging and I think even GMS. And Kafka would be the same problem. But if you have messaging, what can happen is someone sends you a message with wrong type. So what we did, we exposed from the beginning, metric how many messages arrived with the, success with we consider as success, and how many were poisoned or had the wrong type. And this you cannot just do with Istio, because you cannot do with.
I agree.
And I mean, what Istio for me is like the interceptor or decorator pattern. So you can do a lot with that, but you cannot look inside the application and
exactly.
This is a difference. And what is really dangerous in my projects, what developers would like to have, they just put annotations on everything and hope they know that because of magical thinking or whatever, afterwards someone will find out in dashboard went wrong with the app. So I would say we should emphasize more the business metrics as well, not only the metrics from the outside. So we had that problem before Istio with Dynatrace. Some companies believe that you can monitor everything with Dynatrace, which you can do a lot, but you cannot just monitor the core business logic, because it's just algorithm.
Exactly. That's really good reason to use MicroProfile here, because it's so easy to do so.
Exactly. So we have Prometheus built in with technical and business metrics, and you also have other tools. For instance, Sysdig. So the Sysdig, what's there? Why we need it?
So we have two others, Sysdig and LogDNA. Those are third-party services. They are not IBM services, and again, they are optional only. You don't have to use them. But LogDNA is the first thing that makes a lot of sense, because when you have multiple services, as you know, it's difficult to find your logs, right? There's not the one log file anymore. But LogDNA is basically that, distributed logging, right? So you just install, a little, I think, what is it? It's the pod or something in your cluster, and then you get the logs displayed in a really nice dashboard where you can filter and see everything as if it would be one log file. So that's what we use LogDNA for. And Sysdig is basically for monitoring, and to see all types of monitoring, actually including even the metrics for that we just talked about. You can display there as well. We don't have an example for that, but I've read another article. It would be another good blog to show how to actually see your MicroProfile metrics in Sysdig as well.
How you log in your application?
Just standard, I think.
I found some system out print line, so I just wanted to see whether this is.
I think we haven't really done much there. We haven't really used a real logger. It's just a system out at this point, I think.
Yeah. This is what I usually also do. But what I do is I hide the system out print line behind this interface or class, which is going to be injected, so I can replace it later. But the interesting is why I'm asking you this. In my opinion, if you're running on a Kubernetes-like environment, you don't need a logging framework. You can just, log to system out, because all the logs are going to be gathered by OpenShift Kubernetes or whatever infrastructure you have afterwards. So, and you probably don't have, the reason to switch, log levels on your microservice. It would be not considered as a
but the hard part is to find the right log file, right? Because by default you need to say get pods, and then you need the pod name to get the logs. It's not that true. I mean, there are some tools, that make this much easier. In fact, just today I read a blog article announcement from IBM that we open sourced. So KubeCon is going on right now, right? And we used that to do some announcements, and one was to open source some other new Kubernetes tools. And I haven't really looked into it much, because I only read about it today, but it sounds like it's a tool that allows you to easier navigate through all of these, Kubernetes objects. And the little demo that I saw this morning, just a 25 seconds video or something on their website, is you can get all the different pods, in a graphical UI. Essentially, you click on them and you see the logs right there, very fast, very convenient to access, certainly much faster than using a CLI.
But I think on standard OpenShift, there's already Elk installed, so you can just gather the logs automatically. So they are going.
Okay.
The only thing you have to do is to output the log files in a JSON-like format, which some application servers are doing out of the box. But if you're something like, let's say, Quarkus, so there is no default log, so you will have to do it something by yourself, because Quarkus is not a server. So if you don't write a log, there will be no log. This is but interesting. So this is so Sysdig is what Sysdig does. It just gathers the logs or how you use
No,
it?
no, this was log DNA, all kind of metrics. And to be honest, I'm not really an expert in Sysdig, so I don't know too much about it.
Okay.
I basically only know that, the metrics, that you can display, for example, in, Prometheus, etc. You can also use in Sysdig. They also have some nice dashboards, but again, I'm not really an expert there.
And you're also using Kayali, right? So
yes. Yeah, that also comes with Istio, and this is really awesome, if you want to see how your traffic is routed. Like, you have real time live, emulations, or not only emulations, but the real traffic, right? You can see flowing in the UI graphically. Like, especially for this traffic management, we have these two versions here, as we said, Web API version 1 and 2. And when you change between those, you can see directly, in that graphical tool, how much traffic goes where, are there problems, routing issues, and so forth. So I really like that tool. It's a really good way to really find out, what service is invoking which other service in your, basically in your service mesh.
So on the everything is, I would say, beautifully documented. So there are lots of resources around the project. So I think you spend more time documenting than actually writing the code. Is it correct?
That is absolutely correct. And when you look at the top, right, from the GitHub project, and you click on this this bar with the colors, right, you can see how many programming languages we used to do what. And I'm looking at it right now. So we actually 30% of what you find in the repo is Java code, but almost 60% are scripts. So the actual Java code is not much because it's pretty easy, but you need to understand the concepts and how everything, fits together and when to use what and so forth.
And you wrote this with Harald Übele and another
Harald
guy.
Übele and Thomas Südbrücker, right?
And they are also MicroProfile hackers, or what's their role?
Let's put it this way. And I think it's fair to say that until the beginning of this year, they haven't done much with Java, but by now they are pretty good in MicroProfile as well.
And they like it, or they are cursing, stupid Java or whatever. So what was the
No.
honest feedback from non-Java programmers first touch with MicroProfile?
I don't want to put words in their mouths, but I think it was rather positive. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
Because it's pretty easy, right? And obviously it's good that there's so much innovation going on in that space, and that these core tools for microservices are added, and so fast. So
what is the feedback from the audience? So if you present, the application, so you presented it several times, right?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's awesome. I mean, I've received really good evaluations, maybe even better than any other sessions that I did earlier about other technologies. So yeah, it's well received. I mean, as you know, it's always hard, right, to find the right balance. Sometimes you have the absolute beginners. Sometimes you have people who have even more knowledge than you. But yeah, no, I think, the way we position this, right, is that it's a really easy way to get started. So this doesn't show everything that you need to do to build, really complex and sophisticated cloud native apps, but it shows you pretty much everything that you need to get started. So that's kind of the audience that we are trying to address here, right, which are Java developers, which might not have done anything with MicroProfile yet. Okay. And developers who haven't really used Kubernetes and Istio a lot. That's why we implemented all these different scripts. So that's really the key audience, and these people really like it.
So to summarize our talk is to become famous, you really have to focus on MicroProfile and Jakarta EE, and everything else, just as happens, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's amazing what's going on this year with Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. So I'm really glad that so much stuff is going on again.
And what really amazes me, how popular the thing actually is. So I delivered a talk at the WJAX, and I expected not that interest, because the common perception was like Jakarta EE is slow or whatever, and the room was full. So it was there was actually too small, and this was already a larger room. And the same experience on various other conferences. So really, Jakarta EE and MicroProfile, the interest is actually far better than expected.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we gave this talk, a half an hour version of this talk, Harald and I, in Berlin at the We Are Developers Conference. And we had 1,500 people.
Wow.
Listen, so that was
which
amazing.
Conference is it? I never heard about it. We Are Developers. What is it?
We Are Developers is rather new. Last year it occurred in Vienna, and I think it was only the third or maybe fourth time, and this year for the first time in Germany. They say they have 10,000 attendees. Well, that's I think one of the numbers I read. And yeah, it's really big. It's an interesting conference. And yeah, we had the big room, the keynote stage, so that's why probably we had so many people there. It was pretty cool.
And the feedback was still good?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes when you do these really big ones, sometimes you get less feedback than you do the smaller ones. Like I did the same talk, or a very similar one recently at CoTalks in Hamburg, and 3 people came to me after the session. They didn't have any questions or anything. They just wanted to thank me. And as you know, as a speaker, this is the best thing that can happen, right? If people appreciate, your talk, your work, I always love to hear that.
Yeah, perfect. So now, thank you a lot. So we went through the whole example. I hope we didn't forget anything important. So, right?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. Oh, well, actually, maybe one thing. So we didn't talk much about containers. So what I use here for the application server is primarily OpenLiberty. Okay, but then I also added, at least for one of the services, I think it was articles, I started to add Quarkus. Okay, and that's really technology that I've looked into recently and I want to learn much more about because it's an awesome technology, especially here for the container workloads. I mean, OpenLiberty is pretty good as well because it uses OpenJ9 under the cover, the open source IBM JVM, and that one had been designed to run on really small devices, right? Nokia handhelds, etc. And that's why it uses, I think, 50% less memory than Hotspot, and startup time is 50% faster than Hotspot, something like that. And so that's what we use here by default. But again, at least for the article service, there's also a Quarkus implementation. And even though Quarkus is not a Jakarta EE application server, I don't think I had to change any code.
Yeah, exactly.
Other than the POM file.
Exactly.
As far as I remember. So that was pretty cool.
So what I like about Quarkus is because they, this is a true innovation because, I mean, back then, servers were a little bit rewritten to be a little bit smaller, but what Quarkus recognizes, let's do deployment at build time and let's optimize as much as possible at build time and be less dynamic at runtime, because at runtime we don't have to be that dynamic in the clouds. And this is true innovation, and they do it consequently, and the results are staggering. So they are very small, very fast startup times, and it's the same programming model. So I don't care whether it is completely Jakarta certified or not. The only question is how much, if my clients have problems with memory, how long does it take to migrate a Java or Jakarta project to Quarkus? And so far, it was actually a fairly straightforward process to doing this.
Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. So thank you. Where people can find you again, and I have the URI right now, so I can tell this is github.com IBM/cloud-native-starter. This is the URI I will also put it in the show notes. And where people can find you? Do you have Twitter, GitHub account?
Yeah, the easiest thing is probably to find me on Twitter. My direct messages are open, and the account name is N.Heitloff, N for my first name, Niklas, and then my last name, Heitloff. I also have a blog at heitloff.net.
Hey, cool. So thank you, and here again in future.
Adam, thanks a lot for having me. It was great. A lot of fun. Bye.